you enlist?
No. I came into the Air Force through the ROTC program at the University of Massachusetts, Amherst.
Where were you living when you were doing that?
The ROTC? I was at college. I was at the university.
Okay. And what was that experience like?
ROTC? Well, I kind of fell into it. I had some brothers that went to UMass as well, and one of them suggested that there was a great course, one-credit course, and you watch a lot of movies and things like that. So I wandered over. I watched, took the class, enjoyed the class. There was a captain there who was called the Commandant of Cadets, Captain O'Callahan, and great guy. Said, hey, once you come back for the next one, that's better. One thing led to another, and I found myself at training camp and was on my way to signing up.
So, is that why you joined? Just kind of a rolling stone happenstance?
Yeah, basically. You know, it was the people I met, just kind of the environment, what I saw, what I felt, and just decided from there that this is the way I wanted to go.
And why did you choose the Air Force?
Well, like I said, it was just kind of by happenstance. My brother suggested this ROTC class. I took it, enjoyed it. It happened to be an Air Force one, and I always had a kind of an interest in airplanes and things like that. And since my father was a World War II Navy vet, we always had an interest in sort of movies and things like that, so an interest in the military. So they all sort of just combined to put me where I am today.
Do you recall your first days in service?
Yes, I do, because my very first day of active duty, I was supposed to be at the base, and in fact I was in court because I was driving my brother's car and he didn't have an inspection sticker on it. I got a ticket, gave it to him, he didn't pay it, and it turned in from a civil offense to a criminal offense. So I was up at the courthouse in Northampton, and somebody came out and said, how are you going to plead? I said, I'm just here to pay a fine. He said, oh, no, you can't pay a fine. It's like, oh my God. So anyways, it was an interesting first day in the Air Force.
So, your training experiences, did you go to a boot camp sort of?
Yeah, that was the ROTC program. Went to Dover, Delaware, Dover Air Force Base in Delaware, and spent 6 to 8 weeks. And just as we were getting ready to leave, that was the time when President Reagan fired all the air traffic controllers. So there was a lot of disruption and where the plane's going to be flying or not flying and all that kind of stuff. So we drove home from Delaware, which wasn't too bad, but it was just an interesting time. But the experience overall was your typical, you get up, you do PT in the morning, classrooms throughout the day, tour the facilities, get on the aircraft and look around and just kind of get indoctrinated to what the Air Force is about and what its mission is. So,
how did you take to that? What was that like?
I enjoyed it. I mean, for me, it was better than how I had previously spent my last 4 summers. I used to clean storm drains or catch basins. So I spent my summers with a pick and a 12-foot shovel and looking down a hole every day. So this was a much better summer spent than what I had previously done.
Do you remember your instructors?
Yeah, I remember one, Captain Billy J. Stevenson Jr. And he was a great guy, great captain, and he was very positive about the Air Force, and I think he got us off on the right foot. So he was good. I remember he was from the south somewhere, but I don't remember where. But always, his name wasn't William, it was Billy. So.
And from there, where did you go next?
Well, that was the ROTC. So once I graduated from UMass, I got commissioned the same day. But then they delayed my entrance to active duty. So I finished up in May and came on active duty in November and reported out to Leahy Air Force Base in Colorado, and spent 6 weeks of training out there, learning how to do contracting and learning all about the acquisition process. So the base is closed now, and I was off to a great start. I didn't know much about the Air Force, so when I signed up for my orders and all that, they asked me, will you be on base or off base? And I said, I don't know. And they said, oh, you're probably off base. So they gave me the per diem equivalent to living off base, which is substantially more than the amount of money you get for staying on base. Mm-hmm. And well, I just was loaded for the whole time I was there. And then when I got back, I realized I owed the Air Force a whole bunch of money. And let's just say the paycheck after that was very small when I finished up. And then after I finished that training, I reported to my first base, which was Hanscom Air Force Base up in Massachusetts, which was kind of ironic. I grew up, joined the Air Force, see the world, and they sent me up the street from my house. It was about 45 minutes from my house.
And what did you do there?
I had a bunch of different jobs, but basically learned contracting. And so I learned the different levels of contracting and worked my way through, started in R&D contracting. And there were several laboratories there that did basic research, atmospheric type research. So I did that, then moved to base contracting. They're the ones that take care of the base, and we write the contracts for the base services. Did that, and then moved over to, let's see, where did I go after that? I went and became the executive officer to the chief of staff for the Electronic Systems Center, and then from there became the executive officer for the vice commander, the 2-star there, General Tom Brandt, and we were all working for General Chubb at the time, so he was quite a character. So did that, and then went from there to become the deputy director of R&D contracts. And that finished the tour there, and then from there I went off to the Air Force's postgraduate school, the Air Force Institute of Technology AFIT out at Wright-Patterson in Dayton, Ohio, to get my master's degree.
And that was covered by the military?
Yep, so I went to school full-time, got paid full-time, couldn't beat it. We had a good group that we all studied together and helped each other through the program, so basically got a master's degree in 15 months. And then after that I stayed at Wright-Patterson and went to work in a program office that was responsible for the stealth fighter. So that was back in 1988, 89 time frame.
Now, the grad school, what was that program like?
It was pretty intense in the sense that there was a lot to do in a short period of time. Mm-hmm. They didn't take any shortcuts on giving you shorter classes and things like that, but it was, you took the full course load, and we just, just a lot of work in a short period of time. But the instructors were very helpful. They were there they wanted you to succeed, and they were there to help you succeed. So overall, it was a great experience.
And you said you were working in the program office in Ohio?
Right. After I graduated, I went to work at in the F-117 program office. So that's back before the grainy photo of a new special airplane that the Air Force had come up with had just come out. So I worked in there, and that was fascinating, getting to work with the folks there and getting to work with the contractor, Lockheed Martin, at their Skunk Works and where is it, Burbank, and so that was an interesting experience. So I did that, became a contracting officer, and then from there moved over to another SPO. And as part of the development of a contracting officer and acquisition officer in the Air Force, as you move them around to different programs. And I went from that program to the C-17 program, which was a transport plane that was the Air Force was developing at the time.
And again, that was you getting to see something long before anyone else really knew about it.
Right, yeah, I mean, before the F-117, before it became publicly known, kind of working on a program, and it was interesting, you just, when we had to go somewhere, you had to take, you'd leave your spouse a phone number to call if there was a problem, and then they would reach you and get in touch with you, so, just a lot more security associated with the program.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, that was a small, tight-knit group, and then you went to the C-17, which was a big program, and it had a lot of different people involved in it, a much bigger organization. So it was good, very interesting.
And then from there, where did you go?
Then from there, I went to a small special programs office in the Washington, D.C. area, and did some special work for the Department of Defense and the Air Force. So I did that for about 3 years.
And was that a very different experience?
Yeah, it was. It was, you worked very closely with one or two people because of the nature of the work and the security sensitivity associated with it. It was, you work with a very, very small group, both on the government side and then also on the contractor side. And so that was different, and, but it was, after a while it got a little mundane, so I was looking for a change. And it was about that time that the squadron boards were coming open, for the commanders boards were coming open for the Air Force, and they started a new process. So I put my hat in the ring, if you will, to try that, which wound up taking me to Guam, and that's where I wound up at Anderson Air Force Base in Guam.
What was your first impression of Guam?
Well, I guess it was kind of funny how I got there, because we had to go over and talk to the head of contracts for the Air Force, who at the time was Colonel Drews, or General Drews, and Bob Drews, and he asked me what I wanted to do. He suggested what I should do, and he says, "I'll tell you what, I'm headed out to Hawaii next week. I'll talk to some folks out there and see what's going on." So I said, "Great, thank you, sir." I had worked for him previously back at Hanscom Air Force Base. Our paths had crossed. I was a contracts guy that worked for him there. So he goes out to Hawaii. I go off to a class, and I'm down, I don't know, at Fort Belvoir, I think, at a DAU class, and get a call General Drews' exec, and he says, "Congratulations, young man, you're going to Guam." And I was kind of taken aback. I thought when he left he was literally talking about, "I'm going to Hawaii," about Hawaii. So my wife was quite surprised when I told her we were going to Guam. And and then we had to look it up on a map to find out exactly where it was. So it was exciting.
And then getting there, do you recall your impression?
Yeah, well, it takes a long time to get there. It was literally by the time we got up in the morning, and by the time we hit that alarm to get up till the time we laid our head on the pillow, we were basically awake for 24 hours. So we had 3 little ones traveling a long way to Guam, and I know that the plane was full, and a lot of screaming military babies and families and all that kind of stuff. So, but just the exhaustion set in. I remember we used to wrap our littlest one was, I think, 3 months old, Jacob. And so we'd wrap him up in a blanket, and since our other 2 were, they were 4 and 5, or 3 and 4, we'd stick him in a blanket and put him under the seat in front of us. Normally we just store the storage, so we'd wrap him up in a blanket, and he'd take a long nap under there. And a funny story, one time my wife was, we were making one of the trips, and she was so tired that she was holding the baby, and her arm fell, and the baby fell out of her arms, and the flight attendant shook her and said, "Excuse me, miss, is this your baby?" Yes, so. But we got to see a lot of great things there. We had a lifetime of memories in that 2 years that we were stationed on the island.
And when you were there, what was your mission in Guam?
I was the squadron commander for the contracting squadron. So we were responsible for all the goods and services and construction, minor construction, because the Navy was responsible for the larger construction. But we were responsible for all those types of activities that you had to purchase or contract for. So I was the commander of that group that wrote those contracts. So it was, like I mentioned earlier, there's a lot of different experiences. We had an earthquake while we were there. It seemed like every time I had to go TDY to Hawaii or back to the States, we always seemed to have a typhoon, and we'd go into the Tycor 1 or 2, the various typhoon conditions. And but the guys in the squadron, especially the first sergeant, Andy Wall, was always great about coming over the house, and we had metal shutters on the houses because the coconuts would fly, and he'd duct tape the doors and things like that because it rained so hard that it literally can come through the door jams. So he was really great. He always took care of us. So. But the biggest thing I think that happened there was called Operation Pacific Haven, and after the first Gulf War, when we drove the Iraqis back out of Kuwait, and some of the tribes within Iraq and some of the minority ethnic groups, the Kurds in this case, were starting to rebel, and Saddam Hussein literally chased a lot of them out of Iraq into Turkey, and of course they don't get along with the Turks so well, and we made arrangements to bring them to the United States. I think they were probably pretty surprised when they were told they were going to the United States, and they dropped out of the sky and found themselves on the island of Guam. But we took care of them. We got them, and that's where we really had a lot to do, because these people came to the United States with literally, the shirt on their back. So we had to get them immediate housing. We turned a housing area that we had just closed. We refurbished all the houses. We laid some roads down. We bought all kinds of equipment and supplies, and it was a joint effort with the Army, the Navy, the Air Force, and there was about 9,000 of them that wound up living on the base over a period of time. And my wife even got involved in it as well. They had it was called the Freedom School, and she was teaching, and they were looking for volunteers, so she volunteered, and she was teaching some of the elders who were more educated to do the interpreting, and what they would do was teach them about money, time, just the beginning of certain gestures in society, in American society, and just trying to help them as much as they could before they actually got assimilated into American society. Just trying to help them learn some of the language. So she enjoyed that.
You said earlier TDY.
Oh, I'm sorry. TDY is it's a short for temporary duty. So it's the equivalent of taking a business trip in the private sector.
Are there any other outstanding experiences from Guam that you would like to share?
Like I said, I think the greatest part was, living on a base, overseas. It's a whole different, environment than being stationed stateside. Everybody's basically at the same lot in life. There's the various ranks and stuff, but they're basically within a certain age group that are people living on the base. You basically all work for the same employer, you're doing the same mission, different variations of it, but you're all supporting the same thing. So it was a real tight-knit community. And what that meant was, like, the officers club, for instance, was a much more lively place than some of the other bases I had been to, which was but that's where you went for camaraderie, especially Friday afternoons and things like that. So we had a really interesting experience. I mean, I made some trips to Thailand and Diego Garcia, the British Indian Ocean Territory of Diego Garcia, to oversee some contracts that we had in those particular areas. But I think the biggest thing was that was my first time in an earthquake, and it's really unsettling when you don't have any place to run. You just get under the ground, and I get under a table or something like that, and it sounds just like a big truck coming down the street, and then everything starts shaking, and then I just always remember how the ground felt like it had turned to liquid. You could feel it just sort of waving through right through the house, as you're sitting there. So.
Did you have any time to soak in Thailand, or?
Yeah, we did. We were there for a few days. We were negotiating some refueling and basing rights and agreements and things like that with the Royal Thai Air Force, and so we got a chance to get around Bangkok and see the bazaar area, and we also got a chance to Pat Pong, I think it was called, and see some of the palaces and things like that. So it was really quite an experience. So and then in Guam too, we enjoyed the beaches. So I taught the kids how to snorkel in the bathtub, and then we used to go out and just kind of hold hands, and we would just drift along and watch and just be able to look at everything. It was just like swimming in a big aquarium. So that was really neat. I'll never forget that. So.
That is cool.
Yeah.
After your time in Guam, where did you go?
I came back to Washington D.C. and was stationed at the Pentagon, and in that job I was while I was assigned to the contracts group, I actually was put with the detailed, if you will, over to the Air Force civil engineer. and we had projects and we were responsible for implementing some new laws that had just come down with privatization of base housing and utility systems. So basically it was a little bit different. It was how to run a source selection, which is choosing a contractor at the best value, and then the result is not a contract but really a real estate deal at the end of it. So it was a learning experience for all of us, and it was very new, and there was a lot of reports to Congress we had to do, who had a great interest in what we were doing and how we were doing it. And I always remember that I had one of the second projects, which was at Warner Robins, and I wrote the notification package, and since there was no template, we just sort of wrote what we thought they needed to know. And I'll always remember that there was a small PX or BX that was sort of like a satellite one, convenience store type size, that was over on one of the remote housing areas. I didn't think much of it, and I didn't write in the fact that notifying Congress that we were going to, that was going to be sold off or turned over to the contractor when it was privatized. And it wound up in Air Force Times, and then a bunch of, why are you doing this, and why didn't you tell us? And it's one of those things. It was a big deal to them and the folks that lived it, but is sitting up at the Pentagon trying to write through all the economics and why we're doing what and how many houses and what they're going to look like and numbers of families. To me, it didn't seem like it was saw it more as a minor detail. So that was interesting, trying to explain that to certain staffers on the various congressional committees.
After your time at the Pentagon, what did you do?
After that, I went to General Maloshenko, who was SAF AQC at the time, moved from that job over to be the commander of the Defense Contract Management Agency. So after I completed basically my 2 years at SAF AQC, he brought me over to DCMA headquarters and brought me into the special programs area to work some security issues that they were trying to work through. So he asked me to jump in and help out there. So that was down in Springfield, Virginia, at Fort Belvoir at the time.
How was that experience?
It was interesting. It was a chance to get to know a different agency that I hadn't worked for or worked in before. So I started out with helping out in the security area, and then during that time I was stationed there, DCMA, which is now an agency, previously was a command or a subordinate organization under the Defense Logistics Agency, and they pulled them apart. They basically stood up DCMA as its own agency. So while they were in the throes of pulling it apart, they had to stand up certain administrative organizations that they would just normally rely on. So I wound up having to help DCMA stand up its entire security organization until we were able to hire in a full staff of security specialists within the agency. So overall, it was an interesting experience. It's not something I'd really been trained for, but I think they were just looking for some leadership in key areas to help them through the day, and for that it was a great experience.
From Virginia, where did you go?
Then I was selected for command at Pratt & Whitney in East Hartford. So I came up to the plant in June June of 2001 to be the plant commander here in East Hartford, Connecticut, and was here for a period of time, and then of course we had 9/11 happened, and that happened in, well, obviously September. It's kind of funny, everybody remembers where they were, who they were talking to, or what they were doing at the time it happened. We had folks that were on the plane, that were on planes, not the plane, but they, and we told them to, if you're not on a plane, get off the plane, and we kind of had to make sure everybody was accounted for, just like everybody else had to go through. So it was very trying time. And then, so I was there, and then in August of 2002, they were needed what was called a contingency contracts group to go into Afghanistan and help with the contractors on the battlefield. Those were the folks that were responsible for providing the, we call it post-camp and station, running the dining facilities, running the housing areas, the buildings, all of the sort of mission support type of activities of running, if you will, a base or a little town. They turned that over to, for the by and large, turned it over to contractors. So I volunteered to go there and left in October, and spent 6 months over in Bagram, and was responsible for the not only Bagram but Kandahar, Kashi Kanaban, and Uzbekistan. And also at one point they said, since you're the only guy in theater that's doing this kind of work, we need some help with some problems we're having in Djibouti, Africa. So since you're close by, which I kind of shrugged and said, okay, if you need me over there, I'll go over there. So made a couple of trips over to Djibouti to help the contractor who was trying to work with some of the local officials and hiring, doing fair hiring and including all of the villages, if you will, in the hiring of laborers to support the camp there in Djibouti, Camp Lemoore.
What was your impression of Afghanistan?
Just a very different climate than what I was used to. I mean, it was, dirt. I always was amazed at the dirt. You'd step on the dirt and it was like talcum powder. And, it would just, you could stomp your foot down and the dirt would just come up and stay suspended in the air forever. It was just amazing to me how fine the dirt was. The problem is it gets into everything too. Computers, discs were always breaking, back when you were still using hard disks and things like that. I was always gumming them up, and it was tough to do certain things that you're supposed to do in the field. A lot of stars, since it was the base was blacked out at night. You could see stars forever. But the topography was really interesting. You could see sort of forever, and then the mountains where we're used to kind of foothills, and then before you get to, and then sort of smaller mountains before you get to the bigger ones. If you think of the Rockies or even the Appalachians and things like that, it was just the mountains there. That was what really amazed me. They literally seemed to rise right up out of the ground, just straight up.
No warning.
So.
And what about your impressions of Djibouti?
It was hot, and it just it looked like the last of a French colony. You could see the old beauty back when it was kind of a thriving place. But when we made our drive arounds and saw, you'd see the French Foreign Legion guys doing their PT and out running, but about 4 o'clock or 3 o'clock, you'd start to see the tables get set up on the sidewalks, and that's when they either flew in, or that's when the people brought out that cot. It's something that they chew, and it's kind of like a narcotic, and so it was, the base was good, but the air around it looked like it was, kind of really depressed and struggling as a country.
I didn't ask, were there any outstanding experiences in Afghanistan?
I think, the one I'll probably remember most is part of the civil military affairs requirement was for each of the units to adopt a village. So they had an adopt a village program. And what's surprising is how much support comes from volunteers in the United States. So when we were given a village to adopt, Safi was the name of it, I think it was. It was, well, what should we bring out? So the civil engineers would bring out, giant wells where they could keep their water. They'd either dig a well, or in some cases they buried a giant container for them to store their water. And but the rest of it, the clothing and pencils and food supplies, not so much food, but just supplies, were all donated. So we started I talked to my wife, and she reached out to the schools. I took some pictures of the villagers and sent those back, and then she had them printed out, and they made little posters in the kids' schools, and then also at our church, and then over at Pratt & Whitney, they just collected, between all three of them, they collected tons and tons of clothes and shoes and pencils and notebooks and all that. When we went to the village, they took us to their schoolhouse, and I always remember that. I walked in, and it was basically it was a room, and it had two windows. It had a doorway with no door. It had 2 windows with no windows, and it was a dirt floor. And so basically, it was just an enclosure. There was nothing for the instructor to teach with or write with or anything like that. So my wife shipped over some Crayola blackboard paint, and we got some plywood, and we painted the plywood. It was the team. It was basically Major Young, Yi Hung, and myself. We painted them, and then brought them over to them and donated them with lots of chalk so that they could at least have something to write on. And then one of the people in church they said, I don't know what you want to do with these things, but we have all these remnants. So you know how you look at a carpet sample? It has all the different pages and things like that? Yeah. Well, they would have all the different samples. They shipped those over, and they thought those were fantastic because that was their seat. It was like a little mat for all their students so it was like their desk. Mm-hmm. So they were ecstatic to have those things, and of course then we had all the pencils and provided them paper and things like that. So I think that's our biggest experience I remember was the people. The first time we showed up, we met with the elders. We brought some stuff. We asked them what they needed. Then the next time we came back, we had a whole bunch more stuff, boxes and boxes and boxes of stuff. And again, this was all voluntarily donated by people back in the States, And one of the things I remember was, looking around and saying, where are the women? And or the girls. So all we saw was men and boys. So we asked to see, if we could see the girls. So there was some back and forth, and they finally, brought them out and sat them down, and we gave them, a pencil and candy and things like that. the biggest thing I remember was they were absolutely fascinated to have a pencil or a pen. To them, only the village elders had a few scraps of paper and a pen and a pencil. And, when we gave that to them, it was almost as if we had given them some sort of freedom or something that they had just never in their wildest dreams would imagine that they too would get a pen or a pencil someday to write with or draw on. It's like I said, things were so little. I mean, the elders literally only had a few sheets of paper and a pencil, and we would just and they were the only ones that had it, and suddenly we're handing them out to everybody. I don't know if we offended anybody at the time, but they didn't seem to mind, so that's what I was always fascinated by. It wasn't so much the clothes and this or that, but how excited they were to have a pencil or a pen.
It's empowering.
Yeah.
Cool. And any outstanding experiences in Djibouti?
No, not too much. I spent just a short period of time there. I spent a total of maybe 2 weeks there. And the only thing I do remember was, not the only thing, but probably something that stands out was we had to meet with some local officials off the base to talk about, working with all of the people and all of the local villages to hire, don't just hire all from one village and let this village. So we met with a higher up official to discuss that. And of course, they brought out all kinds of food, and so I tried to avoid the meats and things like that, and just tried to eat the rice. But oh boy, I got food poisoning like you wouldn't believe. And that was the longest plane ride of my life, from Djibouti back to Qatar, back to Afghanistan. And the funny thing is when I landed in Bagram, I felt like I was home. Oh, thank God I'm home, And I remember I fell off the gurney too when they were wheeling me out. So it wasn't good. But Major Hung took good care of me and saw to all my needs and made sure that I was. I was in my room, and basically you just gotta wait it out and spent my time in the tent, and he'd check on me all the time and call back to or email back to my wife that I was okay and everything. So unfortunately it wasn't a good experience, but.
Okay, so after Afghanistan.
So I just came back, so that was 6 months. And it was a deployment, and then came back. The funny thing was when I was coming back, the DCMA folks over there said, instead of sending you military air all the way home, we're going to try something different, and we're going to send you home commercial air. But I had a weapon, So they gave me this letter, and it was all in Arabic, and the only words I could see on it was 9mm and then the serial number of the weapon. So I show up at Kuwaiti International Airport, and my weapon is in a case, and it's in one of my duffel bags. And I got the letter in my pocket, and I don't really know what to do. So the bag goes through the x-ray machine, and I walk through, and I'm standing on the other side, and the thing comes back, and it goes back, and it comes back, and then suddenly everybody gathers around. I realize, okay, this is it, So I whip out my letter, and I said, I showed him my letter and said, that's mine, and this is the letter. Of course, I don't know what it says. Well, apparently, it only gave me access to get into the airport with the weapon. But I need to get on a plane. And the plane was going from Kuwait to Bahrain to Germany and then to the United States. And I had to get approval, apparently, because I sat in the airport for 8 hours waiting for all these approvals, and I didn't get the final one until the plane was actually boarding, and I had to run onto the plane. But the various ministries of the different countries apparently had to agree, and I can't speak to anybody back at the office say, don't ever do this again, you know. So anyways, we finally got home, but I remember when I got to, I think it was Bahrain, they called me, all the security guys came up, I had to go down onto the tarmac, they pulled my bag out, had to pull the case out, open the case, you know, check it, verify the serial number, and, you know, just say, hey, thanks for a good job, and, you know, blah, blah, blah. So it was just a real hassle. So I just always remember that. I'm in a foreign country. I just sent a weapon through, you know, security, and I have a letter that I don't know what it says, and I'm hoping it all works out. I mean, it's crazy. So when I got home, I said, I recommend not doing that to somebody else.
So you came back to Connecticut?
Yep, came back to East Hartford and finished out my tour, and then at Pratt & Whitney, and then you know, that was my last tour, and then I retired out of that job. So I had done 21 years at that point, and it was either take the next assignment. I think we were looking possibly at going to Tinker, and, you know, meet my next promotion board, or, you know, stay here. So we liked the neighborhood. We're originally from New England, so at that point we decided that this is the first time in my life I guess I had a choice. So otherwise it was always just take the next assignment. So we chose to stay here and retire.
So you were just started here at that point?
Yep.
Okay, before we talk about that, were you ever in a combat situation?
No. I mean, you know, I was in a war zone in Afghanistan. There were some rocket attacks on the base, but I was never in a position where I would consider myself in, you know, imminent, you know, somebody was pointing a gun at me or actively shooting at me in some way. So I know on the road to out to Koisafi one time, there was the Afghans at the time were doing what was called reseeding, and what they would do would be they'd dig up an old landmine and then they would plant it in the road. And I always remember that we were in a convoy, and the lead car, a truck or whatever, noticed that there was the dirt had been disturbed in the middle of the road. So the soldier gets out and he walks over and he's looking at it, and he's looking at it, and he's looking at it, and then he just kicks it. And we're just like, I don't think that's in the manual. But anyways, it turned out to be nothing. And you could see where destroyed tanks were. You could see where unexploded ordnance had landed from, say, a B-52 or something. There was, I remember we used to drive one area where there were 3 bombs right beside each other, boom, 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 and that didn't explode, and they were just stuck literally in the ground there. But that was the dangerous thing, all the unexploded ordnance and things like that. And then another time we were driving to Kabul, and the car broke down, and the soldiers got a little bit nervous just being out on an exposed, deserted road in the middle of nowhere, because we were still pretty far from Kabul. So, you know, we just had to do that. And then the final time was we were looking at a site to put in Kabul, and I guess somewhere in the back of our convoy somebody had gotten rear-ended or hit, and we were all out of our trucks and cars or whatever, looking at the site when the last car pulled in, and he jumps out and he pulls out his weapon and he goes, "We have problems." And so we all turn around, and since we were in this walled compound that only had one entrance, I think the guy that was the group of men that were chasing him thought they were just chasing one car and not the back end of a convoy. It's just a funny story. So But one car pulls in, he jumps out, pulls out his weapon. Then this car pulls in with 3 or 4 guys. They jump out, and suddenly they see all these people in uniform with their weapons drawn, all pointing at them, and they just jump back in the car and left.
Good choice.
So yeah, but I don't think it was a danger zone for us so much as it was just a funny story.
Right, yeah.
So.
Were there any casualties in your network?
No.
Were you awarded any medals or citations?
Yeah, just various ones for being over there. Obviously the global war on terror, the expeditionary medal, things like that were related to being in Afghanistan. And of course, you get the various medals you got from some of the previous assignments. The Defense Meritorious Service Medal. I had that with 2 or 3 oak leaf clusters and things like that.
Okay, now I'm going to ask you just about quality of life things.
Oh, okay.
How did you stay in touch with your family? I know that they were with you for a bit of it.
Yeah, so during the non-deployment tours, which was basically my whole career, they were always relatively close by. If I went away for an extended period of time, I would, be able to use the phone and stuff like that. The great thing was when we were in Afghanistan, when we first got on the base, there were 17 phones for 4,000 troops or something like that, which caused long lines. But we happened to be tied in with a Army logistics unit who had their own satellite. And it allowed us to make a call to a base, I think it was Fort Monmouth in New Jersey, and then that was a call. It turned into a local call to our house. So I was very, very fortunate that I literally had access every single day to speak to my wife, and then of course we had the email system worked pretty well. So all you had to do is just deal with the time difference.
Right.
So that was a real blessing.
Yeah, that's pretty lucky.
Yeah.
What was the food like?
It was kind of interesting because up at where we were at Bagram when I first got there, it was you had. What was it? You had 2 hot meals a day, a breakfast and a dinner, and then lunch was an MRE. And they only served water or some kind of a milk, remixed milk or whatever the heck it was called. But what was interesting was I used to have to go up to Karshi-Khanabad in Uzbekistan, and that was where all the supplies were flown in. And they had steak and lobster on Friday night and all kinds of stuff. And eventually they were able to get the food down to... So Karshi-Khanabad is to the north. That's the main supply base for Afghanistan. So all the goods from Germany or wherever were coming in there. So they had their sort of first dibs on stuff. And then when it got to Bagram, we would have certain things. And then when you got further south to Kandahar, you got 1 hot meal a day, and there would be a soldier at the dining facility whose job was to make sure you only got 1 water, and then you'd use the water buffaloes. So the further away you got from the supply line, the less food you got, and it was more, let's just say it wasn't as good. And really by the time you got done eating the MREs, towards the end, you're just sort of eating the peanut butter and crackers and, things like that. You just, at that point, you just sort of lost your interest in it.
Yeah,
So,
I can imagine.
yeah.
Did you have enough supplies?
Yep, never had any problem with that. You know, our desks were made from dunnage, you know, which is basically the plywood boxes that stuff gets shipped in. So once they broke it down, the first team that went in there, the initial CCAS team, had built these desks out of the dunnage. So that's what we used, and you know, it's perfectly fine, and got the job done. We had access to computers and phone equipment, so supplies were never really a problem.
Did you feel pressure or stress?
I think just I think in some ways probably there was more pressure on my wife, you know, because at that point we had 5 kids, and so she was at home, 5 boys, and they ranged in you know, ages from you know, 10 or 11 down to 3 months old, 4 months old. So when I left, my youngest was 4 months old, and I came back and he was 10 months old. So for a baby, that's a big change. 6 months, you know, a lot happens in the first year. So it was really great to see the baby and how much he changed. So that, to me, honestly, whatever I was feeling, I think certainly I wasn't under any, you know, combat conditions and the pressures associated with that. It was more of just make sure the mission got done and the folks were taken care of. I think my wife probably had more pressure on her. I always said she's the one that should have got the medal.
Was there anything special that you did for good luck?
Well, we had a little bit of a ritual. We used to smoke cigars, and at 2 o'clock every day I'd call a cigar break, and we'd go out and smoke a cigar, and we would, by the time we got through it, we were ordering all kinds of different cigars and that kind of stuff. I can't say it was really good luck. I did have a cross that was given to me by a relative that I wore, kind of attached it to my dog tags, so that was, I guess, my good luck.
How did people entertain themselves?
I guess maybe occasionally you read. I mean, you worked. So, I mean, to me, you know, you'd get up in the morning, you go do your, some people did PT in the morning, some people did it at the middle of the day to break it up, some people did it in the afternoon, and then you'd go eat, and then you go back to work, and then you go to bed. So I know I had a little kind of a DVD device that I might watch a movie from time to time, but back then they weren't what they have today, you know, with the iPods and all that stuff. But occasionally watch a movie. There really wasn't anything to do in the early days. I know that now that they have Burger Kings and coffee shops and things like that, but it was all blacked out. There was no place to go. There was nothing to do. So you worked and you went to bed. Right. So I read a book.
And was it much different in Afghanistan?
No, it was the same everywhere. Yeah.
Did you have any entertainers come through?
Yeah, we did.
We were just talking about whether or not any entertainers came through.
Yeah, there were. I never went to any of them. But there were some that came through.
Did you get to go on any leave?
No. I mean, I left the country a few times because I had to go back to Kuwait. One of the times they asked me to come back is just when we were getting ready for Operation Iraqi Freedom. We had the largest contingent of DCMA ever deployed at one time, and they asked me to come over, and since I was sort of the only CCAS deployed commander in the Middle East, they asked me to come over and talk to all the folks about what they could expect, what they need to do, and it was so spending a few days out of the theater, if you will, and hanging out in Kuwait was, I guess, the equivalent of leave, even though it wasn't. Yeah. Holy smokes!
Yeah, really?
That's an earthquake.
Yeah. Isn't that bizarre?
We are having an earthquake.
I'm gonna go ahead and stop for just a second. Alright. My next question is, do you recall any particularly humorous or unusual events?
A couple of ones that I think were funny. One was we were getting ready to go out on a night flight. I don't know where we're going, Kandahar or somewhere. We're flying somewhere, and the whole base is blacked out. So the Air Force personnel that are supposed to get us out to the aircraft, they wear a night vision goggle. So the guy jumps in the truck and he doesn't have his night vision goggle. He goes, I know where we're going anyways. So he starts to drive, and he's driving out to the airfield. We can't see a thing. I can't see a thing. And I hear this plane, and it's getting louder and louder and louder. And he keeps driving and driving, and I'm like, I'm beginning to worry. And then the plane's getting louder and louder. I think we're driving towards the plane because most of the time when we were doing, when we were bringing troops out, they do kind of they call it a hot turn, or they leave all the engines running and stuff like that, and they just load it off, load it on, and take off. So I think we're getting to the plane. Well, suddenly, the lights on a C-130 like flash on and flash off, and there is a C-130 coming right at us. He takes the pickup truck, and I got 3 guys in the back or whatever, and he drives off the runway onto the dirt on the side of the airfield. Well, they are still demining the dirt around the airfield. So we don't know if we're in a minefield, if it's been cleared or hasn't been cleared. So we get out of the truck, the plane goes past us, we get out of the truck, and they always teach you to walk in other people's footprints or walk in the tire tracks. So we walked back in the tire tracks, walked back out, and got onto the thing. Well, once we did, the guys in the back, they just lit into him like there was no tomorrow. What do you think you're doing? You're crazy. So anyways, we can laugh now, but almost getting run over by a C-130.
Yeah.
The other one that was kind of funny was right when we landed, the day we landed in Afghanistan, like I said, they do these hot type of things. They throw your stuff off, they leave the engines running and all that. So there's 3 of us getting off the plane. So they tell us, we're going to throw your stuff off the plane, grab your stuff, and you'll feel the prop wash. You feel the stuff coming off the propellers. 1, 2, then keep walking, then make a right, and then walk 100 paces, and then stay together and stand still, and somebody will come get you. Okay, fine. So we feel, the things, we get over, we're standing still, the plane turns, it goes right over our head, turns around and heads off. So then we're standing there, and we're looking around, and suddenly we see tracer fire, heavy weapons, all kinds of stuff. And at night, it's hard to see where the bullets are coming or going. So I'm Air Force, I turned to the Army Major, I said, so what do we do? Are we in the middle of a battle, or are we just standing out here? And so he's like, not sure for a second, and then finally we realized that it's all like going away from us. But it's really hard to see at night whether something is, what direction it's going. So it turned out to be a night fire exercise. But I was like, oh my, and I thought to myself, what have I gotten myself into? So that was kind of funny. But there were probably other ones that, I look back at trying to get a gun through Kuwaiti International Airport in the middle of a war with a piece of paper. I don't even know what it means. That was kind of funny. So.
Were there any pranks that you or the people you were with would pull on each other?
No, not really. I don't think we did much of that. We just no.
What did you think of officers or fellow soldiers?
There were very few that I ever saw that I just ever wondered how they ever got in a uniform, or who decided that they were worthy enough, if you will. And so by and large, I thought they were all genuinely great soldiers or airmen or whatever. I was always very impressed with them. So.
Did you keep a journal at all?
I did. Yep, every day. This was during my deployment, not the rest of my career. And I gave you that.
We'll be scanning that.
Good luck trying to read the chicken scratch.
Hey, that's not part of my job. I just scan it.
Yeah. Well, it's going to challenge that OC, that optical character reader. That's for sure.
Do you recall the day your service ended?
Yeah, the retirement ceremony. So yeah, it was a very nice ceremony, and it was the kids came up and presented me with a sword, so that was kind of neat, and it was a nice way to say goodbye in front of a bunch of folks, and so it was really nice. The family was there and friends, and so overall it was a great day.
And what did you do in the days and weeks afterward? How did you?
I took some time off, so I retired in like August, and then went to work in September. So I took like 2 to 3 weeks off. Just the usual stuff. You've got a young family and a house to keep, so the usual house projects and things like that. I don't remember going anywhere, so I don't think we went anywhere, like on a trip or anything.
And then you stayed here with CCMA.
What's that?
And then you came here and you were working still for CCMA.
Well, actually, after I retired from the military, I went to work for Sikorsky Aircraft, and worked in their quality area, and did that for about 13 months, and then came back to DCMA.
Did you make any close friendships while at the service?
Yeah, I still keep in touch with some folks. Folks that I served with on my first tour. I was an exec and he was chief of protocol, and still keep in touch with him, and have some friends that kept in touch with to this day, still with in Guam, principally our neighbors, and then occasionally I talk with, or exchange an email with our sergeant. That was a squadron commander when I was a squadron commander. So, some folks, not too many, but mostly at Christmas time, exchanging cards.
Are you a member of any veterans organizations?
The American Legion, and I don't know if the Military Officers Association is considered a veterans organization, but I belong to that as well.
Do you attend any reunions or anything like that? Did your military experience influence your thinking about war or about the military in general?
Oh, it had to have. I just think that being a part of it, and then actually having the chance to see the military in action, performing its mission. You just wish sometimes that everybody in America had a chance to see their military in action and the good things that they do. And unfortunately, we have to rely on a reporter or some media outlet reporting on what they think is the story, and what sometimes gets lost behind that is sort of the good deeds, if you will, that are done by the vast majority of our military every day.
How did your service and experiences affect your life?
Well, I think I think the biggest thing is sometimes you don't realize the effect it's had on your family until they talk about it. When my kids talk about when I was gone, you think that they didn't even remember it, but they do, or they even ask, like, what is it that you did? Or when we were going to the Smithsonian, the Air and Space Museum, I said, see that thing over there? I used to work on that, and I was responsible for this or that, and they're really surprised that, oh wow, you did that. And so they used to make fun of me. The kids like to poke fun at me and says, Dad, you didn't carry a rifle, you carried a pencil, So they like to joke about it. But I think it did have a lasting impression on them, and hopefully it's a favorable one. And I know that some of the folks in the neighborhood, it was very nice as a retirement present to me. They presented me with a flagpole, not a flag, but a flagpole. And one of the neighbors said, the best part of it, you don't have to dig the hole. We even hired the guy to dig the hole for you. So anyways, I think you unknowingly have a greater impact on more folks than you think you do. And just by who you are or what you represent. And then people's perception of what the military person is supposed to be, So it was good. So for me, I think it's had obviously a profound effect. I spent from really when I joined ROTC at the age of 20 to the age of 45, being in the military.
And finally, is there anything you would like to add that we have not covered in this interview?
No, I think you did a good job, Brianna. I think it's your whole project is interesting and worthwhile. I think the ability to catch the video these days versus having to rely on letters. As you explained at the old State House when you gave that brief as that presentation was. It's the letters are somewhat arcane now, not the way we communicate these days. So capturing this is a great way to do it. So wish you all the best. Thank you.
And all of that having been said, I would like to thank you for your service and also for your time today.
You're welcome. Thank you.